Every week, millions of Texans hand their paychecks to a company worth around $50 billion, and not one of them can own a piece of it. No stock, no ticker, and absolutely no way in. BlackRock can't buy it, Amazon couldn't outbid for it, and the activist raiders who bully public companies bounce right off. For 120 years, this family has told Wall Street no, and it started in a tent, with a dying man and $60. Let's get into the full story behind the massive supermarket empire of HEB. Chapter 1. The company you cannot buy. Let's start with the thing that should not be possible. HEB does around $50 billion a year in sales, runs more than 400 stores across Texas and Mexico, employs somewhere north of 160,000 people, and if you wanted to buy even one share of it, you couldn't. There's nothing to buy. It's not on the New York Stock Exchange, it's not on the NASDAQ, it's not tucked inside some index fund you already own without realizing it. The company is private in the truest, most old-fashioned sense of the word, and it has stayed that way for over a century while nearly every rival around it either went public, got bought, or quietly disappeared. To put that in perspective, this is the largest private company in Texas and one of the largest privately held companies in the entire United States. The kind of business that, at its size, is almost always publicly traded because staying private this big is genuinely hard to do. Most founders eventually take the money. These ones never did. Here's how tight the grip is. The Butt family controls somewhere between 85 and 90% of the whole thing. Charles Butt, the chairman, is personally worth about $11 billion, which lands him around number 289 on the planet's list of billionaires. His sister Eleanor is worth $4.5 billion. His two nephews are each worth $3.2. That's a single family sitting on a wall of grocery money. And they've arranged their affairs so that no outside investor, no hedge fund, no corporate raider can ever pry the doors open. That title, The Family Wall Street Can't Touch, isn't marketing. It's a description of the actual ownership structure, and by the end of this, you'll understand exactly how the lock works. But the fortress they built is only half the story. The other half is how it got started, because no rational person would have looked at the founding of this empire and predicted anything but heartbreak. It began with the worst news a family could get in the year 1904. Chapter 2. $60 and a death sentence. Picture a canvas tent pitched on the bank of the Guadalupe River in the Texas Hill Country, one of dozens of tents in a rough little camp full of sick people who'd traveled hundreds of miles hoping the dry air would save their lives. Inside one of those tents was Charles Clarence Butt, a former druggist from Tennessee, slowly dying of tuberculosis, at a time when tuberculosis was basically a death sentence with no cure and no medicine that worked. He'd moved his whole family to Kerrville, a town of about 1,600 people, because the doctor said warm, dry air was the only shot he had. It wasn't much of a shot. So his wife did what somebody had to do. Florence Butt, a woman who'd graduated with the highest honors in her college class, the only woman in that class, went to work selling groceries door to door. And it humbled her hard. Her own son later remembered that people would slam their doors right in her refined mother's face. But she kept going, and on November 26, 1905, she scraped together $60, which is maybe $2,000 in today's money, and opened a tiny grocery store on Main Street. 750 square feet on the ground floor. The family lived upstairs. Rent was $9 a month. She turned her own kids into the delivery fleet. Groceries went out first on foot, then in a baby buggy pushed by her youngest boy Howard, then in a $3 toy wagon, and eventually by horse and cart. The tuberculosis that started it all kept taking from them. Her husband died of it, and so did her eldest son years later. This was not a business plan. This was a mother keeping her children fed. And the fact that it later became a $50 billion empire depended entirely on which of those delivery boys grew up to run the place. Chapter 3. The Man Who Killed Credit. That baby buggy kid, Howard Edward Butt, is where the whole thing pivots. He was managing the store by 16, went off to pick grapes in California and serve in the Navy, and came home in 1919 to take over his mother's little shop. And almost immediately, he noticed the flaw that was quietly strangling every grocer of the era: the credit and delivery model. You'd let customers run a tab, deliver to their door, and then spend half your life chasing people for money they owed you? Howard looked at that and said, no more. In 1922, he flipped the store to cash and carry. You come in, you pay, you leave. Nobody's hunting you down at the end of the month. It was cheaper to run, and it meant the company never got buried under a mountain of other people's debts. Speaking of spotting the flaw everyone else just lived with, that kind of clear thinking is the pitch behind a program someone on our team has been curious about, the Billionaire Brain Wave. It's a simple 7-minute audio built around theta brainwave research, the deep focus brain state linked to where big creative ideas come from. You put on headphones once a day, usually with your morning coffee, and that's the whole routine. It's a one-time $39. It comes with bonus guides on money habits and investing basics, and there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So testing it costs you nothing if it's not for you. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to what happened when Howard got ambitious. Then he tried to grow, and it went badly. He opened 4 expansion stores in Central Texas, and all 4 failed. Most people fold after that. Howard just tried again with better aim, a store in Del Rio that worked. And then in 1927, he took the boldest swing of his life, borrowing $38,000, a genuinely frightening sum back then, to buy 3 failing Piggly Wiggly stores down in the Rio Grande Valley. And here's the move that echoes through the next 100 years. To feed those stores, he built his own canning company. He wasn't just selling groceries anymore. He was making them, processing Texas produce and putting it straight on his own shelves. That instinct to own the supply, not just sell it, is the seed of everything HEB becomes. It's why, when the Great Depression flattened the American economy, a chain built on cheap staples and no bad debt didn't just survive, it grew to nearly 20 stores. Then World War II turned that instinct into a superpower. When the country went to war, Howard's canning plant pivoted to making combat rations for the Allied forces, and did it so well the government handed it a prestigious A award for food processing efficiency. With the men overseas, HEB promoted women into store management jobs and built out real training programs to do it. And in 1942, in the middle of all this, the company opened its first modern store in San Antonio, air-conditioned, with a dedicated frozen foods department, both of which were close to science fiction for a grocery store at the time. Howard had stumbled onto the machine that would eventually make his family untouchable. His son would spend 50 years perfecting it. Chapter 4. The Machine Behind the Curtain. So how does a regional grocer with no outside money outcompete Walmart, Kroger, and Amazon on their own turf? The answer is a word that sounds boring and is actually the entire trick: vertical integration. HEB doesn't just sell you milk. It owns the plants that process the milk. It bakes its own bread, makes its own ice cream, cures its own meats, runs its own distribution network, and turns roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of everything on its shelves into its own private label brands. Every one of those steps is a middleman it doesn't have to pay, which means it can undercut national chains on price and still keep the margin. It's the closest thing in American retail to owning the whole river instead of just the fishing spot. On top of that, they source obsessively local, partnering with hundreds of Texas farmers and ranchers so the produce shows up fast and fresh. And then they don't sell to everyone the same way. This is the part I find genuinely clever. Instead of one store format pretending to fit every neighborhood, HEB runs a whole ladder of them. There's the fancy one, Central Market, all organic and gourmet for the crowd that reads ingredient labels for fun. There's the flagship HEB for everybody. And there's Joe V's Smart Shop, a deep discount bruiser aimed straight at Aldi that carries around 9,000 products instead of 40,000, sells 3 pounds of bananas for $1 and 8 fresh tortillas for another $1, and runs lean and cheap on purpose. There's even a Hispanic-focused format built specifically for those shoppers. And the clever part is that even the discount store still slips in a sushi counter and heat and eat meals. Because prepared food carries a fat margin, and there's no reason the budget crowd shouldn't fund it too. One company, quietly serving the millionaire and the family counting quarters without either one feeling out of place. That flexibility is a weapon national chains struggle to copy. But the operational machine is only the money engine. The reason Wall Street can never get its hands on that engine is a completely separate piece of architecture: And to appreciate the scale of what's being protected, you have to see how big this thing actually got. Chapter 5. The Bag Boy Who Built a Kingdom. Charles Butt started working the family stores at age 8, bagging groceries, and was ringing up a cash register by 12. Then he went and got a business degree from Wharton and an MBA from Harvard, came home, and in 1971, at 33, took over a company doing about $250 million a year from roughly 100 stores. Respectable, regional, nothing that would scare anybody in Bentonville or Cincinnati. What he did over the next 50 years is one of the great slow-motion empire builds in American retail. He modernized the management, rolled out private label products to fight the national brands, and, in a genuinely funny detail, finally lifted the ban on selling beer and wine, which his devout Baptist father had enforced for decades. He opened the first 56,000-square-foot superstores, launched the sprawling H-E-B marketplaces with restaurants and coffee bars inside them, and in 1997 did something no other American grocer pulled off cleanly. He marched into Mexico and won. And the timing was shrewd. He'd planned the move as the US and Mexico were still hammering out NAFTA, and he already had a built-in fan base because, for years, Mexicans near the border had been driving north to shop at Texas H-E-Bs, so often they had a word for it. McCalliando, roughly, going to McAllen. So H-E-B went into Monterrey on its own. No joint venture, no local partner holding its hand, put tortillerias and traditional bakeries right in the stores, sourced most of its products from Mexican brands. And today it owns something like 40% of the grocery market in that city and pulls over $1 billion a year out of its Mexican stores alone. And it's worth pausing on what Charles does with the money, because it complicates the usual billionaire story. He's a signatory of the Giving Pledge. He's poured $100 million into Texas public education through a leadership institute he named after his mother, put tens of millions more into teacher scholarships, and after the Uvalde school shooting committed money alongside the company to help build a new elementary school. Whatever you make of a family this powerful, the checkbook points in an unusual direction. Run the numbers forward and they stop feeling real. $250 million when he took over. Around $3 billion by 1991. $7 billion by 1998. $13 billion by the mid-2000s. And today, roughly $50 billion. Which, by the way, quietly makes that $46 billion figure in the title already out of date, because the thing just keeps compounding. That's what half a century of reinvesting every dollar back into the business instead of shipping it to shareholders will do. And that phrase, instead of shipping it to shareholders, is the whole secret. It's finally time to open the vault and show you the lock. Chapter 6. The Fortress with No Door. Here's the part that breaks the brains of finance people. Most big companies, once they hit a certain size, essentially get eaten by the public markets. They sell shares to raise money, and the moment they do, they hand a piece of the steering wheel to outside investors who want returns now. This quarter, no excuses. H-E-B never took that deal. It's organized as a limited partnership with the family holding concentrated voting control, which is a fancy way of saying the Butts kept every meaningful vote for themselves. There are no public shares to accumulate, so there's no backdoor for a hostile takeover, no activist investor who can buy in and start demanding layoffs, no proxy fight, no raider. The door isn't locked. There is no door. Now here's where it gets interesting, and where I owe you the honest version. In 2015, H-E-B did start sharing the wealth. It created a partner stock plan that's handed a meaningful chunk of the company's economic value, up to around 15%, to well over 100,000 employees. Work your 1,000 hours a year, and you own a slice of the upside as the company's value climbs. It's one of the more generous setups in American retail, and people love it. But read the fine print and you find the elegant catch. That stock comes with the money and 0 votes. Employees share in the profits. They don't get a say in the decisions. The family keeps the entire steering wheel. Both things are true at once. It's genuinely more generous than almost any public competitor. And it's specifically engineered so that generosity never costs the family an ounce of control. You can even argue it cuts the other way for shoppers. In some Texas towns, H-E-B is so dominant, holding half the market or more, that there's simply no real alternative. And a company answerable to no outside board is a company you'd better hope stays benevolent. So far, mostly it has. But a fortress this perfectly sealed raises one unavoidable question. What happens when the person holding all the keys is 88 years old? Chapter 7. When the trucks roll into the storm. Before we get to that question, look at what the fortress actually buys the people inside it, because this is where the loyalty comes from. When Hurricane Harvey drowned the Texas coast in 2017, HEB didn't wait for anyone's permission to act. It ran a dedicated emergency command center out of San Antonio, rerouted trucks straight from suppliers when its own distribution centers were cut off, and in the worst hit spots, literally airlifted drivers in by helicopter to get stores open. It rolled out mobile kitchens and disaster units, served more than 60,000 hot meals, handed out over 150,000 cases of water, and put millions of dollars into relief, while national chains were still figuring out whether their locations were even reachable. That's not a one-off. When Hurricane Laura slammed into the coast in 2020, the mobile kitchens rolled into Orange, Texas, and across into Louisiana, serving thousands more hot meals and trucking in pallets of bottled water. And when COVID hit and the entire country lost its mind in the canning aisle, HEB was oddly ready. It had studied earlier pandemics, moved fast on safety measures, capped how much you could hoard so shelves stayed stocked, and put millions towards seniors, first responders, and hundreds of small nonprofits. They've got specialized disaster trailers with onboard kitchens, pharmacies, and ATMs, and an actual playbook they update after every storm. And here's the thing a public company genuinely cannot do as easily. Spend that kind of money, fast, with no shareholder on a conference call, demanding to know why relief efforts are denting the quarterly margin. Being private means being able to just show up. When you don't answer to Wall Street, you get to answer to your neighbors instead. Which is exactly why Texans treat this grocery store like a member of the family. In a bracket-style tournament run by Texas Monthly, readers voted HEB the ultimate Texas brand, beating Whataburger, beating Bluebell, beating Bucksies, in a state that treats all three like religion. That's the payoff of 120 years of staying close to home. But loyalty and command centers can't answer the one thing money can't fix. The man who built the modern empire is in his late 80s, and he has no children to hand it to. Chapter 8. The question at the top of the tower. This is the crack in the fortress, the thing that could undo everything the family spent a century protecting. Charles Butt is 88 and has no direct heirs of his own. And history is brutally clear on what usually happens next. The founder dies, the heirs squabble, somebody wants their money out, and the only clean way to give it to them is to sell the company or take it public, which is precisely how most great private dynasties finally end up on a stock exchange whether they wanted to or not. So the Butts did the unsexy, deeply deliberate thing. Instead of clinging to control until the last possible second, Charles started handing it off while he was still very much around to supervise. In 2021, he passed the CEO job to his nephew, Howard Butt III, a man who'd spent years running the Mexican division and learning the machine from the inside. He kept the chairmanship for himself, kept the family's voting control locked in that partnership structure so no single death can pop it open, and staffed the top with proven operators, including Roxanne Orsak, who joined as a store management trainee back in 1988 and, as of January 2026, became the first woman ever to serve as the company's president. This is succession planned like a chess endgame. Every piece placed years before it's needed, specifically so that when the patriarch is gone, there's nothing for Wall Street to grab in the confusion. The lock is designed to survive the locksmith. Which brings us back to a simple grave in Kerrville. When Florence Butt died in 1954 at 89, every HEB store in Texas closed for the day of her funeral. Her headstone says only mother and wife of CC, not one word about the empire she started with $60 in a tent by the river. That's the whole ethos in a single stone. Build something enormous and stay quiet about it. The reason Wall Street can't touch this family isn't luck or loopholes. It's that 4 generations decided, over and over, that keeping control was worth more than cashing out, and then built the machinery to make that choice permanent. Whether the next generation makes the same call is the only question left. The fortress is ready. Now we find out if they still want to live in it. If stories about the families who quietly own everything are what brought you here, subscribe to Global Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.